Well, welcome, high school students, to something that we're calling the Faithful and Missional podcast. We thought this would be a fun way for us to help set up your conversations in your small group for a series about being faithful and missional in some different spaces in life. And so what this is going to look like is us having some short conversations with some special guests that have stories that they can share to help you start thinking along the lines of some of the different topics that we're covering over the next 4 weeks. And so today we thought we would start with the ultimate rock stars, your guys' small group pastors, Rich Beasley and Kim Smith. They are here to share with you some of their personal experiences and talk a little bit about this. Kim, why don't you start? Just help us to understand the point of the series and what we should be looking for over the next few weeks.
Sure. So you guys have been on a journey, hopefully for the last 2 or 3 years, but maybe you're brand new, but you're a junior or senior, or you've just been, floating along and learning and soaking up some stuff. And this year we just really feel like we're kind of at that spot where it's time to dig into small group, being faithful and missional. So as we work together in faithfulness, and then as we turn outward to missional pieces. And we want to touch all the areas of our life that are kind of the main points of how we can do that, whether it's at school, with our friends, with our family, and specifically today with small groups and what that looks like.
Awesome. So we're going to just hit some major topics. I encourage you to start kind of thinking along the lines of your own life, your own story. Mm-hmm. In this case, your own small group. You guys are here together, and how you can be faithful and missional in these different areas. So let's just start with that idea of being faithful. What is it that we're shooting for in terms of being faithful as a small group? What are some things that we can do to try to be faithful? What does that look like? Help us along in there.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I love to think about with small groups is the Acts 2 church, that picture of that New Testament church after Jesus had gone back to heaven, and we just hear this story about how all the believers were together. They had everything in common. They did life together. They devoted themselves to teaching, to fellowship, to breaking bread together, and to prayer. And that's kind of the model of doing life, which is kind of how we want our small groups to be. That's how we design them to be faithful in those things and to be committed to each other. It's kind of the way we design that.
Yeah.
It's fun to see that play out. I mean, for us as small groups pastors, your small group leaders, your parents, whatever the situation, it's fun to see people just loving on each other, getting along, doing life together. Trusting each other, being vulnerable to each other, growing together.
Right.
In this case, hopefully growing spiritually and loving Jesus a little more closely.
Yeah. Some of those pieces, we've seen firsthand, like some of the prayer pieces where we've seen, one of my favorite stories, as I watched the age group that Rich and I led a couple years ago. We launched them, so they're now in college. But I just remember looking back and watching them just break into prayer groups, just spontaneously after a service because someone needed prayer. And I look over and I'm like, okay, so where did the guys go? And I'm like, oh, they're praying again. They're over there praying for one of their own. And or being at a basketball game. I remember Matt Fogel, when he was around, had been sent to the emergency room for something, and we were at a basketball game, and all of a sudden I told one of the guys on the bench. It was a game time, so it wasn't like a school game, but they heard that he was hurting for whatever reason, and they called a timeout. So they could specifically just circle up and pray for him. So I just know that is a very practical way to be faithful together, and we've enjoyed watching that over the years. So it's really cool.
Okay.
Part of that scripture too is also the multiplication piece, and it's been fun to see both the girls in the class you led and the guys I led. It was fun to see them multiply. I mean, they weren't content to just be the 20 or 25 guys that there were in that class. They multiplied, and it was fun to see new guys come in throughout all high school, whether it was, most of them were probably junior and senior year, where we saw new guys come in and they were part of that community and still are.
Mm-hmm.
So already kind of getting a sense that small group is more than just about meeting together on Wednesday nights and talking about whatever it is that we throw at you and those kind of, that when you talk about trying to dig deeper and go further, it sounds like that's more than just being faithful together for the hour, but really kind of journeying through everything that life has to offer. So
True.
yeah, those are great examples for sure. What are some other things, some words that we kind of threw out as we were talking about this? Things like accountability, words like vulnerability. What do those words make you guys think of in terms of a small group being faithful together?
I know I got to see the guys that I did life with hold each other accountable, and some of it was tough. They made each other angry from time to time because they called each other on stuff. But there's one or two cases that might still be in limbo there, but most of the time that comes around full circle, and they end up loving each other, trusting each other more, knowing that, all right, yeah, I was screwing up at the time, and you guys weren't happy letting me be that. And yeah, it was painful at the moment, but you called me to be better, and it's fun to see that end result of now we're all better together, and it's really cool to be a part of that.
Yeah, thanks for telling me that thing I did not want to hear.
Right.
You know, it's able to look when you
yeah.
can look back at it. I think another important piece to this is the questioning together. If you have a safe place where you can question well, you know, and we all have doubts, we have things that we do not understand, or we hear something from an outside source and it makes us wonder if what we are committed to is legit, or and this is a safe place to be asking those questions, to turn to your leader, to turn to scripture together, to turn to each other, and to be able to share that vulnerability together is a huge piece of that faithfulness walk. So
for sure.
seen a lot of that too. It's great.
That vulnerable piece, though, I mean, there is some relief in that. It's never fun sharing garbage when it's our garbage. Hopefully, we're not sharing other people's garbage. That's called something else. But it's never fun. But there is some relief when I share with you guys my problems or my close circle of friends, and I'm not judged. I'm still encouraged.
For sure.
And so hopefully that's the model that's happening in our groups. We want that to be a trusting place where I can bring my garbage to the table and you're going to help me rather than hurt me with judging me. So,
Right.
so that's what we want.
I think if you guys are listening carefully to what Rich and Kim are saying here, a lot of what they're saying is that everyone has some responsibility here to make a group thrive, to make a group be a faithful, safe place, that you have some responsibility to share your questions and to be vulnerable. You have some responsibility to look at the person next to you and perhaps hold them accountable in some way. You have some responsibility to be the one that calls the time out and says, hey, we're going to pray about something together right now, both on Wednesday nights and through the whole week whenever it is that you guys are interacting. So I think that's a really important piece, that everyone plays a role. That's the only way that groups really thrive and really function. So I think those are some awesome tips in terms of being faithful together, digging in together in that way. But what's the mission? What is it when we say the word missional? What is our group's mission together? Where are we trying to be missional?
Right. We are. Oh, sorry.
It's all right. I mean, ultimately, we want to be on mission to tell people and show people who Jesus is and why he's important to me, why I follow him, and at some point, maybe be able to tell you should follow him. And so there are tons of ways to do that, and we try and offer some. We don't want to tell you every way that you need to do that. Hopefully, you'll figure some of those out on your own at some point in time. But I mean, we encourage just in our small groups in the spring. There'll be a Wednesday night. We want them to serve. We want them to find something in the community out of their normal routine and go love, go be something other than just studying the word in their private group that night. So
you know, we're called to be the light of the world, to be salty and all those, as in flavorful, flavoring the world.
Go be salty in the world. I don't think that's.
So let's go
Would you like
back
to
to what that
demonstrate
used
for
to mean and not what it means today sometimes. But to go out and just, shine, to do that together, but also to bring people in. And I think it's important to note that there are times in a small group where it's not the perfect time to bring a brand new person in. Maybe there's like something that they're walking through, a serious moment or season, but a lot of times it's the perfect place to bring in someone who is searching, who is not maybe sure what they're looking for, or they're ready for the next step and that Rich and I have both seen that in the small groups we've led and the small groups we've watched. I know in the group that I led, we had at least, 3 girls come in the last, like one, I feel like one sophomore year, junior year, and senior year. And the way the group just surrounded them, it was a life-changing thing for them. That's where they made their commitment, and it was that close-knit group of friends that had sought them out at school as friends, but then brought them into that inner core that changed everything for them. So I think that's a piece of missionality. Is that a word?
I think so.
Because I like it.
Now.
We're going to use it. So anyway, I think that's an important piece to that missional piece. So.
I think one really specific way that we might encourage a group to be a little more missional, or if we go to our mission statement as a church, to maybe show some of that ridiculous love, is that actually finding ways to serve together. Is that something that you guys see happening, or something that you
We do.
can encourage, or some tips on how they might serve together?
We do, and we probably get to experience those benefits more often than our students, because we get praised often for how well our students are doing. I know a couple of huge areas. The Foundry, our Foundry ministry is one area that tons of our high school students serve in. I know in our sports ministry, we have a lot of kids that referee upward basketball games, and it's fun. It's fun to see that. It's fun to see them blessing other people in our church, and even people not in our church. I mean, we get a lot of folks on campus for sports leagues that don't have a church relationship, but we still get to serve them, or our kids get to serve them through all kinds of different avenues.
Yeah, it's been fun to watch. And and that's really how you grow together, as well as reach out. That's you see a lot of people go on the mission field, and they're they feel like they bring home more than they were actually able to leave and make a difference. But obviously they are making a difference while they're there, but we are just it is something that's so good for a group to be able to serve together, whatever aspect that might look like. It helps them bond as well. So I love that.
That's a great way to meet new people too. It's not necessarily just your group serving and no one else. There are tons of kids that serve in areas.
Others into that.
You bet.
Yeah.
That's great. So I think big picture here is that we're going to talk about some specific areas over the next few weeks. We're going to talk about being faithful and missional at school, talk about being faithful and missional in your families and at home, talk about being faithful and missional with your friends. But really, all of that would be easier. All of that will go better if you've got a really tight small group doing those things together and walking with each other through that whole journey of trying to love and witness to this world. Because it's not easy, right? It's really not easy, but these groups can play a huge role in that. So as we come to a close in this first conversation, as we're just launching into this series, Rich, what's like a final thought that you might send us off with?
Well, I love to back up our opinions and our advice with Scripture, and I'll just quickly touch on the very end of the scripture Kim went to a little while ago, and that was that Acts 2. I believe 42 is where she started, but I'm just going to go to 47b, and it's about that multiplication, and it's simply just by the folks of the Acts Church, by living together, sharing meals together, sharing everything they had together daily, those were being added to their numbers and were being saved. And so what better way to live out a small group than to keep adding and bringing people to Jesus? And so that can be done through just doing life together, sharing everything you have. Not everything you have, but sharing what you have.
Yeah. It's great. So just so you all know our hearts, why these two pour out day in and day out on staff to make small groups awesome for all of you guys, is because we believe that it is at the very heart of what your best version of your story can be as you go through your student ministry experience here at Eastview. We of course have events going on. We of course have our Sunday services, but it's that group of people that you're sitting with right now that we really believe is the core function of you growing in your faith, both faithfully and missionally. And so we encourage you to jump into some conversation now, talk about this, and make sure you join us again next week, where we'll really dive in specifically, talk about being faithful and missional at school. Thanks guys for sharing your thoughts. We sure appreciate it, and we'll see you all next week.